What is up, baseball fans? Welcome to another episode of Ryan's Ghost. I am your host, Salbo the Stat Guy. My first couple of videos I talked about Nolan Ryan. My last one I talked about RBIs in the batting order. So today I wanted to switch gears and talk about the Baseball Hall of Fame. As we know, the Baseball Hall of Fame is a museum. The first class was voted in back in 1936. The first 5 members were Ty Cobb, Babe Ruth, Honus Wagner, Christy Mathewson, and Walter Johnson. Eventually, they built the museum in Cooperstown, New York. That was dedicated and finished in 1939. The first class was voted in. How Cy Young missed a cut on the first class, I guess we'll never know. But obviously, the players are voted in by the BBWAA, the Baseball Writers Association of America. And they also have a Veterans Committee who will look at some of the maybe overlooked players that played a long time ago. And through the years, they've been voted into the Hall of Fame as well. But with the changing of the guards and younger baseball writers coming in, and now they kind of show their votes online, so you can kind of see who they voted for. And a lot has changed, obviously, in the game over time. The Veterans Committee usually would be, show favoritism to guys who maybe they were teammates and maybe guys who didn't have the numbers to get in. So in this day and age, when the writers vote for players to go into the Hall of Fame, I think they have to ask themselves 7 basic questions. The first one is, obviously, were they a great player? Were you voting in Babe Ruth, or were you voting in somebody who wasn't as good as Babe Ruth? So you have to pretty much determine if he was a great player. Obviously, the second question, how many years were they a great player for? I know people like to use the Sandy Koufax argument. You know, Koufax was dominant for about 5 years, but the rest of his career, he was basically just an average pitcher, maybe even below average pitcher. So I think it depends on how long the player was great for. How long did they play? Were they basically 20-year players? Did they play for 10 years? Did they play for 12 years? Most guys, the longer they play, obviously, the more or the greater their stats are going to be. So they'll obviously have more home runs, more RBIs, maybe more wins, more hits. What position did they play? Were they a first baseman, second baseman, an outfielder, a pitcher? Were they a catcher? I know some people make the argument that certain positions in baseball are kind of underrepresented in the Hall of Fame. So maybe that might give a player an edge if he's a second baseman or a third baseman or a catcher, because those are the positions that don't have a whole lot of players in the Hall of Fame. Did they reach certain benchmarks in their career? When I was a kid growing up, if a player had 500 home runs, he was basically a shoo into the Hall of Fame. Same thing goes if he had 3,000 hits, or if he was a pitcher and he had 300 wins. You pretty much knew they were going to get in. The next question is steroids. You know, obviously in the mid-'80s, Jose Canseco started the trend with steroids, and then it caught on with a lot of other players. So did they play during that era? I mean, those players probably deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, but maybe not as members. Maybe they don't get a plaque and get inducted, but they're in the exhibits, and there's maybe a wing that can kind of explain the whole steroid era and what happened, and you know, the players that were caught juicing and the players that were suspected of caught juicing, because after all, it is a museum. And the last question I think you have to ask is their personality. Did you have a guy like Pete Rose, who was, convicted of betting on baseball and was banished? Well, convicted by baseball, not by a court of law, but he was banished for a while, but now he's off the list because he passed away. Shoeless Joe Jackson was on the ban list because of the Black Sox scandal in 1919, but he's off the banishment list now too, but obviously he's been dead many years. So will those guys eventually get voted in? I know sometimes guys like Ted Williams, Eddie Murray, Curt Schilling, they weren't exactly media darlings when it came to talking to the media. And it cost Ted Williams a couple of MVP votes in certain seasons. So I think writers have to ask basically those 7 questions when figuring out which players they feel deserve to be in the Hall of Fame and which players don't. But if we take a look at some of the benchmarks that I just mentioned, I wanted to kind of break down and discuss some of those. The first one is 300 wins. I doubt you're going to see a 300-game winner anymore in the baseball anytime soon. You're probably never going to see one ever again, just because the way the game has changed. Starting pitchers don't obviously start as many games as they used to. They don't pitch as many innings, and they don't a lot of times get a decision because bullpens are used so often now in the game of baseball. A lot of times the relievers will get a decision instead of the starting pitcher. Of the 24 pitchers that have won 300 games, there's only one of them that's not currently in the Hall of Fame. And if you said Roger Clemens, then you would be correct. And even though Clemens, I believe, had about 354 wins, I think he's going to have a hard time getting in just because he was basically a user of HGH. And even though he still denies it, just like Pete Rose denied he bet on baseball, I think it's going to hurt his chances of getting into the Hall of Fame. And to be honest, I don't think he deserves to be in there. I mean, he was a great pitcher, but the fact that he cheated and the fact that he still denies it to this day, when it's pretty obvious that he did use HGH and steroids. So if we lower that benchmark maybe from 300 wins, maybe down to 250, does that mean that other players might be voted in? For example, a guy like Tommy John, who obviously had a surgery named after him. He was a pitcher for a long time. He won 288 games, but he's not in the Hall of Fame. And he has the most wins out of any pitcher besides Clemens, who currently is not in the Hall of Fame. If we look at a guy like Jamie Moyer, I grew up watching Jamie Moyer throughout his career. I remember collecting his rookie cards. He had 269 wins, but he obviously pitched until his late 40s, and never really considered him a great pitcher. And so even though he does have 269 wins, I never thought of Jamie Moyer as somebody who would be inducted into the Hall of Fame one day. Or you have a guy like Andy Pettitte. Andy Pettitte ended up winning 256 games in his career. He obviously won, I believe, 5 World Series titles with the Yankees. But in 2002 and 2004, after elbow surgery, he actually admitted that he used HGH, but then he stopped using it, and he only used it once after each surgery to help him recover. So I think that kind of hurts his chances a little bit, just because he basically admitted that he did use HGH. But he was a very successful postseason pitcher. He has 19 wins in the postseason, which is an all-time record. And it wasn't like when he was 40 years old, he was throwing his fastball at 95 or 99 or 100 miles an hour. I mean, he was never a power pitcher, so I don't know, even if he did take HGH, how much it really would have helped him as far as increasing the velocity. I think it definitely helped Roger Clemens, as he got on. He was still throwing 95 miles an hour into his 40s. So there were definitely a lot of questions about that. Or if we look at a pitcher like John Lester, who ended up with 200 wins in his career, and he was also a really good postseason pitcher. He went 9-7 with a 2.51 ERA in the postseason. And in the World Series alone, he made 3 appearances, and he was 4-1 with a 1.77 ERA. So should that be more of a deciding factor in getting him into the Hall of Fame because he was such a good postseason pitcher? Was 200 wins enough to get him in there? So I think the voters will have to change the criteria over time and maybe use other metrics to measure whether a pitcher should get into the Hall of Fame and not so much how many wins he had. If we look at some of the current pitchers still pitching today, and we look at how many wins they have, number 1 on the wins list is Justin Verlander. He currently has 266 wins, but he's a free agent right now. And this month, we're on February 1st, so he will turn 43 this month. So I don't think he's going to get to 300. He'd have to win 34 more games. And like I said, he's currently a free agent. There's a chance he might sign, but we're not sure yet. Clayton Kershaw is number 2 as far as active pitchers go. He has 223 wins. He will turn 38 in March, but he also is currently a free agent, and there's a chance he probably will retire. So he's not going to get to 300 wins either, or even 250. Max Scherzer is 3rd on the active win list. He has 221 wins. Scherzer is currently 41 years old, and he's currently a free agent as well. He might sign with another team once the season starts. But he's obviously not going to get to 300 wins, and I don't know if he'll get to 250. He'll probably have to pitch another couple of seasons to get there. Number 4 on the active list is Garrett Cole. Garrett Cole has 153 wins currently, and he's 35 years old. But he is coming off a Tommy John surgery, and 2025 was kind of wiped out. And I believe the Yankees said he should be back in maybe May or June this year. So who knows how many wins he has left in his arm. 5th among current pitchers is Charlie Morton. He has 147 wins, but he's 42 years old. He's currently a free agent, and he's probably not going to pitch this year. He's probably, I think, retired. And last on the list is Chris Sale. He has 145 wins currently. He's 36 years old. He'll be 37 when the season starts. So I don't think there's any chance he gets to 300 wins or even 200 wins for that matter. So if we go on that criteria alone, obviously we're not going to be able to vote people in because no one's ever going to hit 300 wins again. And so writers will obviously, I could think, have to look at other metrics to decide whether starting pitchers deserve to get into the Hall of Fame. But I think if you get up to about 250 wins, I think your chances are probably better than if you only had 200 wins. The next benchmark is 3,000 hits. Currently, or I should say in the history of baseball, there have been 33 players who have collected 3,000 hits, and only 5 of them are currently not in the Hall of Fame. The first one is obviously Pete Rose. He collected 4,256 hits in his career, but because of his gambling issues and his banishment from baseball, he was never voted in. But now that he has passed away and he is taken off the banishment list, I think eventually he will get voted in. Albert Pujols currently has 3,384 hits. Miguel Cabrera has 3,174 hits. Both of them are retired now, but when the 5-year wait period is over, I guarantee that they'll be voted into the Hall of Fame. And that only leaves 2 hitters with 3,000 hits, and they're not in the Hall of Fame, and that is Alex Rodriguez, because he is a steroid user, and he was suspended for the entire 2014 season for his failed drug test, and Rafael Palmeiro, had over 3,000 hits as well, but because of his steroid use as well, I don't think that they'll be voted into the Hall of Fame. So if we look at the current players, there are 5 of them right now who have over 2,000 hits. The first one is Freddie Freeman. He has 2,431 hits. He turned 36 recently, so he might have a chance to get to 3,000 hits depending on how much longer he plays. Second on the list is Jose Altuve. He has 2,388 hits. He'll turn 36 in May, so depending on how long he plays, he has an outside chance, I think, of getting 3,000 hits. Third on the current list is Andrew McCutchen. He has 2,266 hits, but he's 39 years old. He's currently a free agent, so he's not going to reach 3,000 hits. I don't even know if he's going to play this year. He might go back to the Pirates, maybe. Fourth on the list is Paul Goldschmidt. He has 2,190 hits, but he's currently 38 years old, and he's also a current free agent as well. There was some talk the Yankees might have an interest in bringing him back. And last but not least, Manny Machado has 2,069 hits. He's 33 years old. He'll be 34 in July. But because he became a starter at such a young age, he was a starter for the Baltimore Orioles when he was only 20 years old. I think he has a chance to get to 3,000 hits because he's only 33. He'll probably play until maybe he's 40. So as I said, of the 5 players listed, Freeman, Altuve, and Machado, I think have an outside shot at 3,000 hits. But after that, I would be very surprised if a player playing right now gets to 3,000 hits. I think that might be another one that's gone by the wayside, just like 300 wins. Now, if we look at the case of Omar Vizquel, currently Omar Vizquel has the most career hits of anyone who is not in the Hall of Fame except for Barry Bonds, because obviously Bonds used steroids, so I don't think he'll ever get in. But Vizquel is interesting because he obviously played for a long time. He played over 20 seasons, but he played, and he holds 3 major league records as far as shortstop go. He has the records for most career games played at 2,709. He holds the major league record for shortstops with 1,734 double plays, and he holds the record for a 9.85 fielding percentage. So I think you could make a case that Omar Vizquel deserves to be in the Hall of Fame because his numbers were just as good, if not better, than Ozzie Smith. Smith obviously was a little more charismatic. He won 13 Gold Gloves. Vizquel won 11. Vizquel did have some domestic violence charges on him years ago, which might kind of hurt his case to get into the Hall of Fame. But I think if you let Ozzie Smith in, I don't see a reason why you can't vote Omar Vizquel in, especially since his offensive numbers were obviously superior to Ozzie Smith's numbers. The last benchmark is 500 home runs. Prior to 1980, only 12 players had hit 500 home runs in their career. But since 1980, 16 more players have achieved that mark, and of those 16, 12 of them hit their 500th home run in the year 2000 or later. So it definitely helped that HGH and steroids were prevalent during that time period because I think it definitely helped to boost some players' home run totals. And of course, like I said, that started with Jose Canseco in the mid-'80s, and he gave steroids to a lot of his teammates. He wrote a book about it. So if we look at the players who are currently in Major League Baseball, there's only 2 of them that have reached 400 home runs. The first one is Giancarlo Stanton. He has 453. And Mike Trout is the second one. He has 404. So if those guys can stay healthy, and that's a big if because they've always had injuries plague them throughout their careers, especially recently, they might have an outside chance to get to 500. But if we look at the current players along with them, there's 11 of them who have over 300 home runs. Number 1 is Paul Goldschmidt. He has 372 home runs, but like I said, he aged 38. He only hit 10 homers last year, so I don't think he's going to get to 500. He might not even get to 400, depending on if he ever plays again. Number 2 on the list is Manny Machado. He has 369 home runs, and like I said, he's only 33 years old, so I think he has a good chance to get to 500 if he keeps playing. Third on the list is Aaron Judge. Judge currently has 368 home runs. He's 33. He'll be 34 when the season starts in April, so I think he has an outside shot, depending on how long he plays, but I think he could get there as well. Fourth on the list is Freddie Freeman. He has 367 home runs. Like I said, he's age 36, but he's not really a home run hitter, so he's definitely not going to get to 500. He might get to 400, though. Fifth on the list is Bryce Harper. He has 363 home runs. He's only 33 years old right now. He obviously was a starter at a young age, so I think he has a chance to get to 500. He can DH later on in his career. Sixth is Nolan Arenado. He has 353 home runs. He's 34. He'll be 35 in April when the season starts. And last year, his production kind of fell off a cliff. And so he recently got traded from the Cardinals to the Arizona Diamondbacks. So maybe playing in the dry heat in Arizona will help his home run totals. But I would not bank on the fact that he's going to get up to 500. Seventh on the list is Kyle Schwarber. He has 340 home runs currently. He's only 32. He'll be 33 in March next month. So I think he has an outside chance. Number 8 on the list is Carlos Santana. He has 335 home runs, but he'll be 40 in April. He's a free agent right now. I don't think he's going to get signed this year. He's probably going to retire. 9 is Andrew McCutchen. He has 332 home runs, but he's also 39 as well, and there's a chance he won't play this year, so he's not going to get to 500. Eugenio Suarez, who was actually signed today, I think, by the Reds, he has 325 home runs. He's 34 years old, so we think he has an outside chance if he plays a lot longer, or if he can keep hitting 40 to 50 home runs every year. And last on the list is Salvador Perez. He has 303 home runs, but he's currently 35. He'll be 36 in May, so I just don't think he's going to play long enough to get to 500 home runs. So once again, aside from Giancarlo Stanton and Mike Trout, you might not see any 500 home run hitters for the next couple of years, so they might start to go extinct as well. You just never know. Now, as far as the current class of Hall of Famers, as we know, in the last month, Jeff Kent was voted into the Hall of Fame, Andrew Jones, and Carlos Beltran all received that honor. So if we look at Jeff Kent, obviously Kent was a third baseman when he first came up, but then he settled and became a second baseman most of his career. And he hit the most home runs out of any second baseman in Major League history. He's in the top 3 as far as RBIs go. So I think you can make a case that Jeff Kent deserved to be there. He was a good, productive offensive player for a long time. I mean, he did obviously play in the steroid era where everyone's numbers were a little inflated, but he was never connected to steroids. And since there aren't a ton of second basemen in the Hall of Fame, I think that was a good pick for them. The second guy was Andrew Jones. Andrew Jones is interesting because he obviously came up as a rookie phenom with the Braves, and in 1996 he came up towards the end of the year, and he played in the World Series that year, and in Game 1 as a 19-year-old, he had 2 home runs against the Yankees. For the series, he had 400, he had 2 homers, he had 6 ribbies, but the Braves won the first 2 games, but then lost 4 straight to the Yankees, and after that, Jones got back to the World Series in 1999, but he couldn't produce that magic again, and in the Yankees, against the Yankees in 1999, he won 1 for 13. So those are the only 2 World Series that he appeared in. But as far as his career goes, he did have a 10-year stretch where he was one of the best players in baseball. And he's obviously considered one of the greatest defensive center fielders of all time. For his career, he had 434 home runs, he had 1,289 RBIs, and he hit 254. And so if we look at a 10-year stretch of Andrew Jones, so from 1998 to 2007, Jones averaged about 34.5 home runs, 103 RBIs, and he hit 266. However, after becoming a free agent after the end of the 2007 season, he signed a 2-year deal with the Dodgers, and reports have it that he showed up to camp overweight in spring training in 2008. He had knee surgery a couple months later in May, and he never really got on track that year. He ended up playing in 75 games in 2008. He hit 158 with 3 home runs and 14 RBIs. So I think the Dodgers saw the writing on the wall, and they cut him after 1 season. And he bounced around after that with a couple of different teams. He joined the Texas Rangers in 2009. He played for the White Sox in 2010. And he played for the Yankees his last 2 years, 2011 and 2012. And so if we look at the last 5 years of his career, so the 2 years with the Dodgers, the year with Texas, with the White Sox, and with the Yankees, he only averaged 87 games. And he hit 13 home runs. He averaged 34 RBIs, and he only hit 210. So he had a great 10-year career. Put up great numbers, and then after that, he just kind of fell off a cliff and just never recovered. So I don't know if I would consider him a Hall of Famer. I mean, he was obviously a good player. He was a great defensive center fielder. So I think he was kind of hit or miss. I could kind of take it. I could kind of leave it. The last guy was Carlos Beltran. When Beltran first came up, he was considered one of those 5-tool players. He could run, he could field, he could hit for power, he could hit for average, and he was a good defensive center fielder. And he was obviously a very good player for a long time, but I would never, in my opinion, consider Carlos Beltran a great player. For his career, he did hit 435 home runs. He had 1,587 RBIs, and he hit 279 in his career. He did play for 7 different teams, and he was part of the cheating scandal in 2017 with the Houston Astros. But he did play well in the playoffs. In 65 career postseason games, he did hit 307, and he had a couple of really good monster series back when he was I believe with the Cardinals or with the Astros. So, once again, like I said, I never thought of him as a great player. He was always, I thought, a very good player. And so when we look at Jones's numbers and Beltran's numbers, they're very similar to guys like Dale Murphy and Dwight Evans and Jim Edmonds and guys who were not voted into the Hall of Fame. So I think you kind of get into that murky area where you start comparing numbers, and you're never going to make everybody happy as far as who gets in and who doesn't. But the Hall of Fame, I think, is definitely starting to get a little bit watered down. And there are obviously guys that are in there that did not have the numbers, that you would not consider great players, or I would consider Hall of Fame players. And I don't really want to pick on anybody who's in there right now, but if you look at some of the numbers of guys, you'll find a lot of guys who didn't really have the longevity or the great numbers, but they still got voted in for maybe sentimental reasons, or maybe because of the era they played in. Obviously, you can't vote the same for guys in the 1990s and 2000s as you did for players who played, during the Dead Ball era, or, guys who played back in the 30s and 40s. Obviously, it's a lot different game. But it'll be interesting to see in the next couple of years how the Hall of Fame voting evolves and what the new criteria is that they will accept for certain players. Will you maybe see more closers get in? You're not really going to see a whole lot of relief pitchers get in, but maybe that'll change as well. So it'll be interesting to see how baseball kind of adapts with the times. But those clear benchmarks of 3,000 hits, 300 wins, and 500 home runs, you're probably not going to see anytime soon. Well, thanks for watching. Please leave a like or please leave a comment. Let me know what you think of the video. Let me know if there are other players who you think deserve to be in the Hall of Fame but have not been voted in yet. Let me know if there are guys you think who are in the Hall of Fame who should not be there. And what do you think baseball will do going forward as far as who they vote in and who they leave out? Anyway, this is Salbo the Stat Guy. Take it easy, everybody.